Okay, welcome back. This is Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is all about the artistic part of this. You know, some of this stuff that we're doing is mechanical, and then the other is artistic, and this is the artistic part. So this is all about web design. So as always, we start with learning objectives, page 205. Describe the most common types of web organization. The principles of visual design. Yeah, kind of a touchy-feely part. Design for your target audience. Use clear, easy-to-use navigation. Improve the readability. Use graphics appropriately. Apply the concept of universal design. We've heard that before. Describe web page layout design choices and a whole series of best practices at the end of the chapter. Okay, so the first thing they talk about is know your audience. Well, okay. Let's say that your audience is kids. That's probably what your website's going to be like. It's going to be bright colors and big things and things that kind of move around. I mean, you can see when I hover over one of the little things, it wiggles. And, you know, there's a little star that kind of follows the cursor around. I mean, this is clearly designed for kids. I would not recommend this for a financial application, but it's big, it's bright, it's lots of moving parts. Cool. So to contrast that, let's talk about an example where it's kind of text intensive, but, you know, that's kind of sort of okay. So one of the things you can do, I have one up here called daily rotation. Daily rotation is a news aggregator. So there's no graphics in here at all. This is just text. I mean, every single one of these are hyperlinks. And so this is perfectly okay. It's crowded. There's an awful lot of material in here. And yes, I mean, very judicious use of white space and lots of stuff, and it's crammed in tight. But I kind of like that. I mean, if I'm going to do a news aggregator, an RSS feed thing, then I don't particularly need any graphics or anything flashing. I mean, just, you know, give me my stuff and leave me the heck alone. All right. So it's difficult to kind of sort of gauge how to do a design because, again, you have to know your audience. Well, one of the problems is, you know, how to describe what a good web page looks like. And that's actually kind of difficult. It's a heck of a lot easier to describe web pages that are bad. And there's a website out there, and the name of it is Web Pages That Suck. I am not making this up. Web Pages That Suck. Now, I'll admit they haven't updated it in a while, but they give lists of these bad examples. And you can just go click on one. And, I mean, some of these, like this one, talk about, well, let's see if this guy is still up and running. Okay, I'm not going to bother to click through it. But anyway, you know, very bad contrast and red and lots of stuff and just looks ugly. So most people understand web design by not looking at good design examples. They learn by looking at bad design examples. So web pages that suck is a good example. There's lots of them out there. So when it comes time to actually putting your web page together, you basically have to have some sort of an organization. I mean, somehow, you know, the beginning part of your web page and then perhaps some other parts. I mean, here they're using a navigational structure that goes across the top. That's kind of cool. My web page, I use a navigation structure that goes along the side, but that's just a choice. So bottom line is you need to kind of have a visual before you start producing your web page. You need to kind of figure out what the organization, this is going to be on the main page and this is going to be on that. And so in this particular case, I have a list of articles. So here's some actual things you can download, and here's some code snippets, and here's some sample applications, here's some work that's in progress, and here's some ancient stuff, and here's some extra links, and blah, 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 blah. So it's kind of organized like an organizational chart. So this would be a good example. You know, it looks just like an org chart, doesn't it? You know, with the company president at the top, you know. So, you know, home and about and contacts and products and different categories. So you know what we're talking about. It's just kind of normal things. The problem is you can kind of overdo this. If you look in the book, on page 207 and thereabouts, They talk about you could have this thing too wide, where you have just way too many choices. I mean, you could have like 50 choices at the top level, and most people would look at that and just be overwhelmed and kind of go, ah, geez. So the idea is don't make it too wide because there's way too many things to go to. And also don't make it too tall. The other example is if I have to click this, then go to that, and then go to that, and then go to this, and this go to this, I'm going to get kind of annoyed, particularly if I know exactly where I want to go and I have to go through those steps. So they invented something called the 3-click rule. The 3-click rule is basically what it means is I should be able to go to anywhere I want to go in 3 clicks or less. If your nav structure requires me to click more than that, then probably something is wrong. Okay. Back on this example here, it's always a good idea that your navigation structure all appear on the page. In other words, I don't want to have to scroll. I'm going to intentionally do this. I don't want to have something where you have to use the scroll bar either up or down or left or right in order to see the navigation. So the navigation ought to be visible basically at all times. Another cool thing is the nav structure really shouldn't change when you navigate through, because that's just simple, right? I mean, yes, if you have a really, really complex one, then maybe you'll have the standard set of nav structure, and then maybe another set that appears to get you a little deeper. There's some choices here. Okay, so those are two choices. On page 208, they talk about what's called a linear organization, and this is useful in a scenario when, I don't know, like a teaching example where you do step 1, step 2, step 3, or a very good example of a linear web structure is when you get to a shopping cart. You browse your items, and then you go to a page, and then you go to another thing, and then you go to an order confirmation, and then you go to, it's just a step by step by step by step, and so the pages kind of go in order. Yeah, you can kind of back up a little bit, but normally for normal content like what's showing here, normal content wouldn't have a linear structure. Step 1 do this, step 2 do that. I mean, because I don't know, if you're just providing them information, there really isn't that's just not the way the information is normally organized. So that's only really available for special circumstances, such as, I don't know, step-by-step recipe kind of a thing. I'm guessing here. And shopping carts and those kinds of things where you're led down a path that you have to follow. There's also one called random organization, which means, quite frankly, what that means is no organization. The web pages are just kind of scattered about. There's no particular structure. And about the only place I've ever seen this was this thing that was like an art gallery. And you walk through the rooms in this art gallery, and you could just kind of go wherever you wanted. You could turn left here, you can go straight there, and it was just kind of amazing. And in an art gallery, it doesn't really matter if you're in an impressionist section and you step over and you're in a modern section when you walk through a door. It's okay. So there are a few scenarios, but certainly none in this class, where you might want to have this completely random, unstructured structure. That didn't make any sense, but you know what I mean. Okay. On 209, they talk about the principles of visual design, and that we're going to spend an awful lot of time on that topic. So this is the visual design didn't start with web pages. I mean, print advertisement. Back in the days when we had magazines and newspapers that everyone read, print media, advertisement and print media was where this was born. And they have an awful lot of science behind it. These aren't people that are just making up stuff. These people spend an awful lot of energy on how to do this so-called visual design. Okay, so there are 4 principles of doing a design. One is repetition, contrast, proximity, and alignment. So the first one, repetition. Repetition basically means find something that's similar. Like in this particular case, I have a color over here in this graphic and a yellow fade, and I'm using yellow buttons. In other words, I'm using similar colors and similar themes. So repetition means I don't have, you see the exact same thing over again. The call to action, the things that you want to grab. Now, if this was print media, it'd probably be like a telephone number or a web page or something, right? But in our case, it's normally going to be buttons or navigational structure. I want this to be, very, very in your face, very obvious that it's there. And because of the concept of repetition, I want it to be in the exact same location no matter what page I go to. In other words, if you don't even know where you're going, but you want to go to the third one down, well, it'll always be the third one down. Okay, cool. Another thing about repetition is the use of fonts. Keep the instead of having like a gazillion fonts, just use the same font over and over again. So repetition is same nav structure over and over again. Same color scheme over and over again. Same fonts over and over again. You kind of get the point? Okay, good. So the use of color, shape, font, and image can unify a design. How's that for a cool thing? So later on, some people design an entire web page around like a central photo. Like in the example they have in the book is, they have some outdoor, thing where you're renting canoes or something, and so they have a picture of a lake, and so they pick pictures. They pick colors off of that, and that becomes the theme for the entire web page or the entire website, rather. Okay, the next of the 4 principles is contrast. And contrast means provide emphasis on something to make it more visible, right? Contrast. So bring it to attention. And then an obvious example is like background colors or an image. That makes sense. But the things that are not quite so obvious is things like the buy button. If you're wanting to draw somebody to a button that says buy now, then it ought to be big, it ought to be red, it ought to be in your face. Don't make them go look for it. Oh, for God's sake. So, for example, I'm going to bring up one of these. I'm just going to pick one. So here's a thing, and down at the bottom is, a series of links, and then some things that you can download. Downloading this wasn't really the primary feature, so I put it at the bottom. However, if downloading this was the most important thing, I have another article where that is. In fact, let's go there. Here's an article where downloading is a prominent thing, so I have another prominent download. Well, it's also down here at the bottom. I mean, you can go all the way to the bottom to find it, but contrast meant it's a different color, it still kind of matches the theme, and it's in your face, it's up front. Don't make them look. Don't make them hunt for stuff. Okay, so if you want to draw attention to these buttons, make them somehow different. Like in this case, I have the background being yellow. Cool. Proximity. On page 210, they talk about keep related things together. In other words, if all these are nav buttons, well then keep them all together in one spot. Don't have one button over here and another button over here. I mean, come on. They all ought to appear either all horizontal or all vertical, or just don't mess things. Keep things kind of lined up. And conversely, this is the weird part. Conversely, keep unrelated things separate. Now, a lot of people use, you remember the H tag, right? So like this is an H1 tag and this is an H2 tag. And so this is related to the background information, which if you weren't interested in the background, most people are not, skip right over it. And then here's something about this, and here's some release notes. And then finally we get down to things like the user's guide. So if you wanted to go directly to the user's guide, this would provide you a way to keep all the user's guide stuff together and away from the other stuff. The idea is keep related things together. Just kind of sort of makes sense. The same is true if you're writing a term paper or something. You have a paragraph on whatever, kumquats. Well, then it ought to be separate from the other paragraphs. This is not rocket surgery. But it is coming up on the 15-minute mark, so let's pause this and pick it up in just a second.